Okay, here we are. It's the 27th. Another Monday. I'm going to put up one more discussion on the welfare state that I'm sure you'll enjoy. You've got a final to look at. Let's go over here. Now remember that someone, Mr. Mache, I think, asked me about what's due. Here's the syllabus, just to do a little housekeeping. We're going to explore the economics of the welfare state, and then we're going to end up with income distributions, uncertainty, and risk. God, if you're interested in risk, I just got this book back from a student, Against the Gods. This is one of the most fascinating books if you're a business student or you fancy yourself a social scientist. You should read that book. It's by Peter Bernstein. As you see from the top, a worldwide bestseller. It's really entertaining, and if you can get through that book, it's worth. It'll change your life. It just will. Then Kahneman and Nudge and the other that I told you about, those are good ones too. But anyway, back to house cleaning. We're here and we're house cleaning. Am I running? Yeah. You've got a final up, and I'll show you where that is. It's in assignments, I think, final exam, right? I hope it's up. Final exam, summer 2020. There it is. It's a doc. If you're having trouble with that doc, it's because you're on Apple or you're doing something silly. You go to the campus or somewhere and download it as a Word document. I can't hold your hand any more than that. You got to be able to master some of this. Every year or semester I get someone who says, "Well, I can't see the." I'll show you what it looks like. I can't see this graphic or that graphic that goes with this question. I don't. I hate to be a hard ass, but you see this. Let's put it over here. It's on the other screen. You see this. If you can't see this graphic or something, that's because you're on an Apple machine, and this is a Word document. Or you're having some interface problem. So figure it out. And or phone a friend. Have them send you pictures. It's here, and it's also here in files. I always put these things up in files, exams. There it is in the docs there. If you haven't looked through here, there's all kinds of stuff to use. But anyway, back to the syllabus. You can see by the syllabus that here are the things that you need to do for me. Where are they? Homework is 25%. That's this. Now I'm in just to make it good. I'm in student mode. So this is what you see, right? I've got 18 open. I'm going to open up something in 19 and 20. Very quick. Or maybe I won't. I don't know, because it's on the final exam. It's on the final. Screw it. Maybe I'll give you a break there. Yay, Cleaver. Thank you. If I was a student, I could look at my grades. I click on grades over here. If you're unclear as to what your grades are, here they are. This is what I'm looking at. So if you're that's 25% of your grade. This. Okay? So, figure it out and make sure you're well. You should be at 100%. That shouldn't be a big deal. Anyhow, there's that. Discussions, 50% of your grade. If you missed a discussion, put it in. Put it in. I'll mark you down, but it doesn't matter. You'll get any of you who have put in stuff late. You know that I'm not a hard ass. I'm not interested in you not doing well in the course. Anyway, final exam, 25%. 80 questions, again. And I should, damn it, I should have put it up. Let's put it up again. Files, exams, there it is. See, it brings it up on this screen. Now, send it to me somehow, you know, so you can go through here and use a pen and mark, you know, a digital pen and mark each one, or whatever you want to do, or eliminate the other three and just leave me with the answer. Or you can just use a separate Word doc and put the answers on that. Don't forget, there's a number of essay questions, you might say, in here. I think there's 4 of them. Look at 37 use table. Here's the table. So look at this one, 38. 2 alternative policies to protect the domestic industries from world trade. That's one of them. So you want to answer that in essay form and tell me what I need to know about that. Now the last one is going to sort you all out. Here's the last question. We're in the unprecedented economic black swan event. If you don't know what that means, look it the hell up. Event which has been a catalyst for what could be a long recessionary period, in my belief. Using what you have learned in this class and your personal experience in 200 words or so, give me an assessment of the monetary and fiscal response from the political class. I consider the Fed the political class. Maybe you don't. I do. What would you do differently in a hypothetical where you were king or queen? Maybe your favorite fascist government. What would you do to stimulate the economy differently? Knowing what you know, show me that you did some reading, or you understood some of the lectures, or some of the things that came up. I'm not looking for thesis level. I'm looking for good writing, but you've all proven yourselves to be pretty good writers. So give me something decent there that shows me that you sort of understood what we were getting at. Okay. I hope that does it for the course. You get it? That's it. That's all there is to it to get a grade. Let me go to IER. I just wanted to follow up on a few things. This article struck a nerve with me. I don't know if any of you have heard of this film. Stalin's Man at the New York Times. During the 30s, there was a lack of understanding of what happened in the Soviet Union, the tragedy that happened. Much like there was a lack of understanding of the tragedy of Nazi Germany. And I consider both to be equally heinous excesses on the left. And you can argue that with me and say that the Nazis were on the right, and we're going to have a vigorous debate in that regard. But you better know let's start out with the fact that Nazi stands for National Socialist Workers' Party, and we'll go from there. So if you've read F.A. Hayek, The Road to Serfdom, I think he lays out a pretty good case that what occurred in Germany was an excess on the left. Now, it's been drilled into your brains that the Holocaust was an excess on the right, and I don't get it. But I don't see right and left anymore, so let's not argue. James Freeman wrote this little piece on it's a review of a film. So the words "must see" are grotesquely overused in movie reviews, but in this case they are apt, writes Francis Meyer. He's talking about the remarkable film Mr. Jones, currently available on Amazon and other platforms. It's a story of Soviet communist horror and the New York Times writer who enabled it. Now, we're picking on the Times here. I think there was plenty of naivete or I can't even think of a more horrible phrase like ignoring something in front of your face that is truly evil. And this was a story about one such person. At a time when lying, bullying, and violence seemed to be making a comeback in the vestments of progress, equality, and justice, Mr. Meyer notes that the film is a useful lesson in consequences. It's an opportunity to watch and learn. This is why I push Solzhenitsyn, and I think it should be read by every high school senior, because we're forgetting of what happened when an egalitarian idea began to take hold and ideology trumped. It's that idea of the means don't matter, it's the ends. And so Anthony Lane explains in New Yorker, what matters in Mr. Jones is the Holodomor, the famine that befell Ukraine in the years 1932 to 1933. Okay, 32 to 33. We are in the midst of the New Deal, Franklin Roosevelt, and we're copying. Franklin Roosevelt had a group of men, sorry, ladies, that's why it was messed up, probably, called the Brain Trust, and there were some women involved, and Amity Shlaes lays it out really well in The Forgotten Man. Amity Shlaes, The Forgotten Man. But Tugwell was one of them, and he had come back from the Soviet Union, where they had showed him Potemkin villages, which means phony villages. They do the same thing in North Korea these days. If you take a vacation to North Korea, you'll find all these happy, shiny faces. They don't show the guns, and we called that a Potemkin village. We, the United States, once we knew that we were being duped. So they during 1932 and 33, current scholarship estimates that just under 4 million people died. My estimate is more like 6, but a lot of people died. They did not pass away from natural causes. The best and most detailed English language study of the subject is Red Famine, 2017 book by Anne Applebaum, which is an excellent book. I've read reviews. I have not read the book. But I, from what I understand, she is meticulous. Demonstrates that starvation was a deliberate policy enforced by Stalin through requisition of crops and other products, and the widespread persecution, deportation, and even eviction of non-compliant. The grand scheme of collectivized farming had failed, as any local farmer could have predicted, yet it was not ideologically allowed to fail. So let's just talk about what happened here in human terms. In human terms, what occurred was a group of politicians who were ideologically possessed with this leftist utopian idea that Marx and Engels had laid out, believed that the ends justified the means. And they went into these little towns and they found out who was resented. So maybe they went to the local bar. In this town, it would be they went to the local bar and maybe they found, the sort of ne'er-do-well, maybe the snowboarder who was 40 years old and never quite got his, never bought a house, and never quite felt the rise of the tide of capitalism, and never got anywhere. Sort of the people that couldn't get any traction in life because they believed that leisure was more important than working. It's the ant and the grasshopper, and it is a judgment on those types of people. I'm sorry. I've met them, and they said, well, I never got a house here, and houses you can't afford them because all these rich people are here now. And I'm like, geez, okay. Maybe you should have moved. I don't know. But nonetheless, you can find those people. And what the government did was they found those people who had a resentment. They had a resentment. They had this thing called envy. And when they found these envious people, Nietzsche talked about them in the Tarantulas, those envious people were more than happy to point out who the kulaks were. And a kulak was anyone, they had just, in Russia, the Tsar had just released a lot of land to the serfs, and the serfs could now own land. And there were some people who were good farmers, and they maybe had a horse and a plow and had maybe built a house and had a cow, and they were the well-to-do. I mean, relatively. Well, the resentful people pointed at the well-to-do and the more well-to-do and said, those guys are the problem. Those men and women are the problem. And they put them all on trains and they sent them to Siberia in the winter and dropped them off with nothing. And most of them died. Well, that was all fine and good. But what was the effect? Well, the effect was they emptied out the cities and they collectivized the farms, and the starvation followed. So it was a horror show. Look it up. Look up Holodomor. It's there's a wiki for that, and it'll talk about the famine and the causes. Genius. And now, so what this movie was about was this New York Times reporter who continued to report that things were good. The genius move of this scathing and suspenseful film by Poland's Agnieszka, I'm sorry if you're Polish, I'm crushing that name, Holland, who was once arrested by the Soviets during the Prague Spring, is in whom it selects to be the menacing, dead-eyed apparatchik with a cold determination to search out and destroy any threats to the regime. He's none other than Walter Duranty, the New York Times man in Moscow, or rather, Moscow's man at the New York Times. It's a story about this New York Times reporter who clearly was ideologically possessed and believed in something that was dreadfully evil. So I haven't watched the film. I'm going to, just as soon as I get done here on Amazon. I can't wait to see it. But I wanted to suggest that to you if you're interested in that type of history. Anyway, so back to AIER. There was one other thing I want to share with you before I start lecturing on some of the Krugman and Wells. You've all seen this: masks, seat belts, and Peltzman effects. This was a very interesting article in lieu of what we've been studying, so I wanted to go over it with you just for a moment. You can find it here at the AIER. The AIER is clearly a Austrian bend to it, a classical liberal bend to it, but nonetheless, it's economics. So, seatbelts save lives. Always wear your seatbelt. We've all seen this crap. And it's true, seatbelts save lives. Well, do they? So listen to what this is by a fellow by the name of Vincent Galoso. A few days ago, in my home province of Quebec. I'm a Canadian. For those of you who don't know where Quebec is, beautiful city. You should go there. It's my ex-wife who spoke fluent French said it was the closest thing to Europe that I'd ever get to without going to Europe. And I said, well, that's good enough for me. So, passed a regulation that made compulsory the use of face masks in public. Okay? Now, we're under this compulsion. We, the people, are under this compulsion by, I don't know, who is this Governor Polis fellow? He's not my governor. But apparently he is, and we all have to listen to Governor Polis, and if you don't, you're going to get arrested or worse. But I don't know, people seem to police this pretty well, and I wear my mask when I go out. So the main motivation of the regulation is the prevention of second wave of the coronavirus. That's absurd on its face. We're going to get a second and third and fourth wave, even with a vaccine. Anybody worth their salt who's a scientist would tell you that. the reaction has been virulent on the part of skeptics who argue that masks are inefficient and that the compulsion by the state is an infringement on personal rights. Some people covered this in their already. I've read some of the Independence Day stuff, Declaration of Independence Day stuff. But a few people mentioned, look at this compulsory crap going on. You know, this is wrong. Others think the other way. Go figure. Defenders of the regulation argue the opposite with regards to effectiveness of masks and further highlight that it is a reasonable infringement of personal rights, especially as it protects others from the risk produced by a single sick individual. You know, AIDS, we didn't quarantine anybody, but, you know, people are quickly to say, yeah, but, you know, AIDS was only sexually transmitted. I'm like, no, it was transmitted by blood, but nonetheless, we didn't feel necessary to do that. We thought it was an infringement on people's rights, and I agree with that. None of the parties involved provide answers about whether the regulation will reduce propagation. This is the important thing. This is what this course is about. This is what economists do. We don't give a damn. We're going to put aside the issue of whether or not, like I say, whether or not it's a personal liberty issue, and we're just going to go straight to the, does it work? Tell me if it works. If you can prove efficacy, I can tell you something that, you know, we could talk about the freedom issue afterwards. So the arguments are being invoked on all sides reveal a depressing pretense of knowledge. Everybody thinks they're right. That's what a pretense of knowledge is. Notice that in the statement above, I do not say that masks are ineffective at reducing propagation. The evidence suggests they are. Rather, I am suggesting that compelling the use of masks may end up increasing propagation, even though masks by themselves reduce the risk of transmitting the infection and reduce, very mildly, the risks of catching the infection. Now, here's where you have to listen carefully and think, okay? To comprehend this argument, you must understand how people manage risk. That's what this book is about. That's what the last chapter is about. How do people manage risks? Okay? By using the illustration of mandatory seatbelt laws. Seatbelts save lives, right? Well, let's find out. By themselves, seatbelts clearly reduce the mortality risk associated with driving. Yep. In the 1960s, numerous countries, including the U.S., began adopting laws that mandated the use of seatbelts. I was virulently against. Don't tell me what to do inside my car. Okay? The hope is that this would reduce mortality to motor accidents. And I've heard the argument on the other side, well, that'll decrease our healthcare costs. No. I'm not listening to that argument. I am not paying for your healthcare. Right? I don't want to pay for your health. Well, society does. Who's society? Society is us. Individuals. No, that's not a good argument. However, economist Gordon Tullock once quipped that if the government wanted people to drive safely, they'd mandate a spike in the middle of the steering wheel. Why would that be? Because of how we respond to risks. Now, imagine you got a steering wheel with some kind of spike, like looking at you in the face, like right like this. How are you going to drive? Carefully. You're going to drive like, I don't want to do that and hit that goddamn spike because I'll be dead. So why does he say that? Right? Why? So because of how we respond to risk. If we know that even the slightest accident might impale us on our driving wheel, we would all drive more safely. While it is a strange thought experiment, we can run it in reverse. If one driver knows that all the other drivers are wearing a seatbelt while he also wears a seatbelt, that driver faces a lower risk level. As a result, feeling safer, that driver acts more recklessly. He exceeds the speed limit, accelerates at yellow lights, etc. The greater recklessness, in turn, increase the risks of an accident, right? You know what also increase accidents? Mandatory insurance. Then you all look at me like, mandatory insurance is completely unconstitutional. You know, but how would we get people to pay for accidents if they have no money? Debtor's prison. Take their kayak and their mountain bike. Take all their shit. Garnish their pay. I'll tell you what, accidents would be reduced very quickly under those set of circumstances. But now you go in insurance and insure all these people, aided and abetted by Geico, your sponsor, and Geico says, oh, we want everybody to be. They are lobbying hard for mandatory automobile insurance everywhere. Liability, right? There's no liability insurance. How many people sue? Not as many. You create these things through incentives. This is what we're learning in this course. So the greater the recklessness, in turn, increases the risk of an accident. Because, right? You put helmets on motorcycle riders, they take more chances. It's just, that's how risk works, right? You bail out big banks, what do? They take bigger risks. Duh. As a result, there's an ambiguous effect from the regulation. On the one hand, the law reduces risk, but it also induces a behavioral response that increases the likelihood of an accident. Thus, we must wonder which effect dominates the other. Now you can see where the paper is. This is the paper that you would write. Okay, the experiment that you would run, the data that you would collect as a researcher. Okay, face masks. The same logic. Imagine a fictitious Canadian economist, maybe our writer, who, fearing the risk of bringing the virus to a loved one or catching the virus himself, avoids situations that would be too risky for his taste. He avoids going to the coffee shop for a latte, limits himself to only doing groceries. With everyone being forced to wear a face mask, he may decide to go pick up that latte. Technically, the activities of shopping for coffee and groceries are individually less risky with mandatory face masks. However, that fictitious economist now exposes himself to two activities that carry a risk rather than a single activity, and so he faces a higher likelihood of catching the disease. He went out twice instead of once or 0 times, right? Because of the false safety effect of the mask, which we don't even have to argue the efficacy of the mask. All we have to do is say that we know that it's not 100% effective. So, this is terrible. Technically, the activities of shopping for coffee and groceries are individually less risky with mandatory face masks. However, that fictitious economist now exposes himself to 2 activities rather than the single, and so he faces a higher likelihood of catching the disease. Just as with the seat belts, we must ask, this is the question, this is the hypothesis, which effect dominates the risk reduction of masks or the behavioral response, right? The reduction mask or the behavioral response. So if I were to begin a research paper, my hypothesis might be masks don't work because they increase the behavior of social distancing. They increase or they decrease social distancing, and they increase risky behavior, thereby creating more transmission of the disease. And then I go to try and prove that hypothesis or disprove it, right? Is it null or not? That's how real researchers do real work. You know, and maybe they write pieces like this, but nonetheless, there's a paper. There will be a paper. So in the end, the answer is empirical, can be counted, right? Yet the case of what, in other words, empirical empire, the highest. One will outweigh the other. One will be here, right? The first paper, yet the case for seatbelt laws suggests that the precise answer might be elusive. And here's where the history of economics is important. The first paper of importance on the effect of seatbelts was published in the 1970s by Sam Peltzman. That's why his name is in the up here. Who found that the behavioral response by American drivers completely washed out the effects of the law. There's another thing, and I'll pass that on after I'm done here. The first paper of importance. Since then, numerous papers on the topic have been published. Some confirm, while others infirm them. Infirm mean they go against that. All these studies confirm that there was some offsetting behavior. They simply cannot agree on how strong. So everyone agreed that there was offsetting behavior. We couldn't come up with how strong it was. However, let us take one important fact into consideration. The first laws mandating seatbelt use were adopted in the 60s. This is more than 50 years ago. Yet there's still a discussion among experts who try to design the most convincing statistical tests. If there is uncertainty about the past, how can the experts today be certain that compelling the use of face masks will not result in a greater level of risk-taking? Okay? And then he ends up, of course, with caveat emptor. I do not pretend to know how big the risk is. I only state that it exists. However, all sides of the debate on mandatory use of masks involve their arguments with certainty and without a shadow of a doubt. So now you don't know. You don't know. And Vincent, of course, is not stupid. He's an assistant professor of economics at King's University College. That's in England. He obtained a PhD in economic history from the London School. So, he's a right-wing a-hole. All right, you can do that if you'd like. He seems to care about people. So, anyway, that's an interesting thought. Oh, and the other thing I was going to add to this, and this is something I studied quite extensively because I got mad about seatbelts, right? I don't like being told what to do. And I especially don't like shit in my car that I don't want, like airbags. So when the airbag thing started out, I was an economist, and I said the airbag argument went hot and heavy. Now all cars have these airbags. And do they save lives? Well, some say yes, some say no. Mr. Peltzman says no. But they do add to the cost of the car significantly. Seatbelts, not so much, but they do add to the cost of the car significantly. I can't remember what intermittent brakes they call the, oh God. When you put your brakes on, how they go on and off? Some of you young people don't even know what that is. But that's a feature, an electronic feature of your brakes that became a law. Those things for tire pressure that became the law, like you don't know how to fill up your tires, so we're going to make you and have this thing go off on your dash. It came from some rollover accidents with Ford Explorers. These are all product liability things and safety things. All those add to the cost of a car. Now, you could put a number on that, right? And what happens is the effect of adding all the safety features to the car is that people buy fewer new cars. Now, you got to stay with me on this. That means, I thought to myself, yeah, but what's the cost in lives of the fleet getting older and not being maintained as well, right? Because I came from this fleet maintenance kind of side of things, and I was a mechanic. I thought to myself, all these safety features are adding to the cost of the car, but what does it really mean? It means that there's a whole bunch of 95 Toyota Camrys going up and down 82. Now, how good are the brakes on them? How good's the front end? How good are the ball joints? How good are, you get what I'm after here, right? So there's people that studied this. Go figure. There were people that were ahead of me on this crap, and they went and they studied it, and I found the studies, of course, and they were conclusive in my opinion. They were conclusive in that the additional cost of the vehicle kept people from purchasing new cars, made the fleet of cars, we call the whole fleet in the United States, older, and increased the accidents. So all of the safety equipment that is required by law, regulation, and law has actually led to more deaths. Look it up yourself. So again, we look at effects. We look at things that we can measure, and we look at empirical evidence of what's going on. That is the essence of microeconomics. So I hope you got something out of that little story. Make sure you get that mask on. And look up Peltzman's work if you'd like. It's all very fascinating, and we'll talk about that. So that little article sort of brings out a whole bunch of different things we talked about this semester, and it's not a capstone, but it's sort of a keystone to all the things that we're doing. What's really happening? That's the question you want to ask. What is really happening? Okay, I'm going to go through, I have chapter 11 here. Let me see, I got chapter 10, I think. I want to go through chapter 10 and 11 real quick, because these two chapters are, I don't know, they're kind of dull. They're very mathy, and I want you to know what they are, but they're, again, this is the idea of the rational consumer bothers me already. We talked about utility early on, and the idea of a util. I can't. Immediately we run into trouble. But anyway, what the Keynesian wants you to learn, what the modern economists, most of them want you to learn, is what factors determine how consumers spend their money. Well, who doesn't want to know that if they have a product? That's a handy thing to know. Why do we use utility to describe people's tastes? Those of you who maybe are marketing majors, this is very interesting to you. Keep up with it. Why do the principle of diminishing marginal utility, right? What's one more beer when I've had 18? Why is this is the essence of why the demand curve is downward sloping, right? As price goes down, we demand more, but not that much more. What's the optimum consumption bundle? How do income and substitution effects raise their ugly heads? How do rational consumers choose what to spend their money on? Ooh, I want to lower it. I gotta make this bigger. There we go. Utility. Okay, now this is fine. I'm good. Utility is the value or satisfaction from consumption. This is great. We run into trouble a little later, and I'll show you why. An individual's consumption bundle is a collection of all the goods and services consumed by that individual. All right. You know where I'm going to have trouble. You all probably already know why there's problems here. An individual's utility function gives the total utility generated by his or her consumption bundle. Okay, here's where we run into trouble. Util is a unit of utility. Now, again, economists are just so desperate to make a social science into a hard science that they come up with this crap. What the hell is a util? No one's ever seen a util. Anyway, you're going to see it over and over, so ignore me. But in the back of your head, try and remember Professor Cleaver making fun of a util. I even have one somewhere. Somebody gave me a util because I just called it bullshit for 20 years, and then they said, no, I found one. They sent it to me. Marginal utility, MU, is the change in utility from consuming an additional unit. So, what's beer number 18 when you've had 17? How many utils? Okay, what's a util? Oops, I went way far ahead. Boom, boom. There we are. Diminishing marginal utility. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Is that each additional unit of good adds less to utility than the previous? Yeah. We can all agree on that. And here's Cassie, this young lady, and what is she doing? Total utility utils and quantity of egg rolls. You know, how many damn egg rolls can you eat? Well, you hit a peak and then you start going down. Jesus, it's like 7 or 8. That's a lot of it's a lot of egg rolls. This is so completely objective. It's absurd. But for Cassie, maybe that's correct. You know, I always think of my wife, Kelly. You know, Kelly's utility function for egg rolls is like 4, but when she's pregnant, it's 9. You know, like, okay, there's variables, and more variables than you can possibly shake a stick at. So, and then we have marginal utility per egg roll, and you can see how it goes down. Oh, this is your demand curve, right? In a sense. Okay, assuming that marginal utilities for first 3 units of a good are 200, 150, 25. The total utility when 2 units are consumed is what? It would be 350. 200 and 150 is 350, right? That's brutally weird. And anyway, you got to know this stuff. If you move on in economics, you got to know it so that you can dispute it. And maybe you won't. Maybe you think there's a thing called a util running around. Discuss, are people today more constrained by time or by money? This is what immediately, you know, Krugman and Wells are so good about bringing up the subjectivity of the thing that they just tried to quantify. You know, which would you rather do, A or B? A. You know, well, how much of A? Well, 2A. 2A equals B. Now we've got a math equation, right? The utility of A and B equals 2A equals B. Oh my God. Does that work? I don't know. What effect does time have or money have on cookbooks, restaurant meals, childcare? What other markets are affected? Obviously, all kinds of markets. Discuss whether going to college is worth it, considering rising tuition costs and student debt and lingering unemployment. Little do they know, this was written some years ago. Make 2 arguments for and 2 arguments against. I could make about 20 arguments against. We have a friend staying who's been in higher education for a long time, and I think she's tired of me railing against the absurdity of higher education. But nonetheless, her argument is excellent, because her argument is, yeah, but Jim, you have to have a degree to even get in the, I can hear you all nodding, to even get your resume looked at, you have to have a degree. So it's like checking a box. It's a license. It's a license requirement. It's like having a driver's license. So what I'm hoping is, you know, my whole focus is to get you to think about something other than just checking the box. And I don't know if I did that or not. Anyway, budget constraints. Amount of money consumer can spend is limited. Decision to consume more of one good is also a decision to consume less of another good. A budget constraint requires the cost of a consumer's consumption bundle be no more than the consumer's income. So now we're going to get graphic here. Consumption possibilities, budget line shows the consumption bundles available to a consumer who spends all of his or her income. This is helpful for some analysis. Maybe you'll be doing some for a company to try and figure out whether we should make egg rolls or Coke. Right, so quantity of Coke in bottles, quantity of egg rolls, and here's Sammy's budget line. Affordable consumption of bundles that cost all of Sammy's income. you know, 8 Cokes, 1 egg roll, 6 Cokes, 2. You get it, right? These are out here is all unaffordable. In here is affordable. You know, in case you could do this, you know, 4 and 1 right here, this point right here. And what would you, well, you'd have extra income. Maybe you would save that money. Wouldn't that be crazy? You know, that kind of stuff. Your income's $40. The price of each unit of food is $2, and the price of each unit of clothing is 10. You can see just like this how you draw that line. It's hopefully fairly simple for you. Same thing. They want you, if you want to do these, if you're having trouble with them, let me know. They're in the homework. You've done them already, most of you. So optimum consumption bundle that maximizes consumers' total utility given the constraints, right? You know, the constraints of the budget. And you're trying to get maximum utility. Oh, it's so subjective. It's ridiculous. How many gumballs? How many ice cream cones? It depends on 2 things. How much you like it, how much it costs. Well, if utility is affected by cost, is it really utility? Oh, Jesus. It's just Mary and Joseph. It's just, it's just ridiculously subjective. Since most decisions are made on the margin, we'll need to know how much extra utility will you get from spending your next dollar on apples, on oranges. We want to maximize our utility per dollar spent. Not all the time, you know. People do all kinds of silly stuff with their money. Marginal utility per dollar spent on a good or service. And here we go. This is the math. Oh, God. I don't want to bore you with this. And we're going to go. If you don't understand this, call me. And we'll go over it. But it's just marginal utility price and adjust your spending towards the good to give you more utility per dollar. They're telling you what to do now, which is even greater. Wow, now that I took microeconomics, I know that I get more utility from ice cream than gum, but it should be 50 cents more because it's times 2. You know, buy more gum because gum makes you happier, dollar for dollar, than ice cream. That is such a crock of shit. Gum does not make you happier. Maybe it does. I don't know. Is it nicotine gum? So now we've got an equation of ice cream and gum, which makes my head want to explode. But this is where we're getting towards this consumption bundle that people buy. Now we have pitfalls, right? Right marginal comparison. Marginal analysis solves how much decisions by setting the marginal benefit of some activity. In consumption decisions, unlike production decisions, a budget constraint must be accounted for. By factoring in prices, we take into account the fact that a consumer has a limited amount of money to spend, right? You know, people with, I can tell you that the only thing that, you know, once I had a certain amount of money, I said, I can have ice cream and gum, you know, so who cares? It's really nice to be able to get what you want at the grocery store without thinking about it. Makes Kelly crazy. She still has this budget in her head, and when I go to the grocery store, I'm like, screw that, and I just buy what I want. It makes her nuts because she has constraints. I don't. I think, you know, Klondike bars are what we need. You know, so very interesting. The right answer for marginal decisions involves consumption. Involving consumption is that the marginal utility per dollar spent on each good must be the same as the optimal consumption bundle. And you can see those pitfalls really just end the discussion. You know, it doesn't work. An increase in the price of good X while holding income and the price of good Y constant will increase the marginal utility. No. marginal utility stays the same. But does it? Sometimes, well, the answer is the third one. Decrease the marginal utility per dollar spent on good X. Right? That's the correct answer, according to their mathematics. But it doesn't really work that way. Sometimes the price of good X goes up, and you think, if it's a BMW or some kind of status symbol, you might go, oh, I want it more. Some people don't like that, Jif peanut butter went up. I'm not buying anything else but Jif. This just proves that it's good, because the price went up. So the marginal utility didn't go down necessarily. Anyway. Substitution. We talked about this earlier in the semester. Optimal consumption rule explains why we buy less of something when the price rises. The substitution effect of a change in the price of a good. The change in the quantity consumed of that good, and the consumer substitutes for the good that has become relatively cheaper for the good that has become relatively more expensive, right? Hot dogs and steak, substitutes. The income effect and normal goods and inferior goods. The change of a price of good is the change in the quantity consumed of a good that results in the change in the consumer's purchasing power, right? When we get our next $1,200 stimulus checks, we're going to sell a lot of steak, right? Normal goods increase in the price of good causes consumers' purchasing power to drop and reduces the consumption. Vice versa, inferior goods increase in the price of the good causes consumers' purchasing power to drop and increases consumption. Right? Logical. That's absolutely logical, and those are good terms to have. Is it a normal good? Is it an inferior good? And again, a business would use this for a marketing mix. What's a Giffen good? A very rare inferior good for which the income effect outweighs the substitution effect, and the demand curve slopes upward. Irish potatoes, an inferior good that that took up so much of an average person's income that when potato prices rose, purchasing power dropped, and they had to eat more of all inferior goods, including potatoes. In perfect logical sense, that's a Giffen good. After Dr. Giffen, look him up if you'd like. Conspicuous consumption. Oh gosh, we're seeing this in China, of course, as the power of markets take over. You have this. There's a lot of theory about this ugly period. The Roaring '20s were like this. Juliet Shore, the overspent American. Americans are practitioners of conspicuous consumption. Aspen's like this. You go up to Kimosabe, which is a retail store, and there's a $30,000 belt buckle. I've been in Louis Vuitton and made purchase. One purchase. I don't get it. My wife loves that bag, and she really does. That would be crazy to me, but I like guns, and I got a bunch of them, and I love tools, and who am I? Is it conspicuous? Some might say so. Americans, so they go broke trying to keep up with people at the top of the income ladder and deny them the amount of credit card debt they have, even to themselves. Yeah, that credit card problem comes up in Kahneman's book, and we delude ourselves about how much we owe. That's a good book, Juliet Shore. These are more practice questions. Increasing the price of good X while holding income and the price of good Y constantly is the negative substitution effect. So that's that chapter. I'm going to try and do one more tonight, but let's see what I'm about an hour in, 54 minutes in. Maybe we'll go right to 11 and make this a long-ish lecture because I'm on a roll and it's quiet. So 11 is behind the supply curve, inputs and costs. If you didn't take accounting, there's a couple reasons to take accounting. I know I push it. That's not because I teach it. Nobody likes teaching accounting, and I do. So I don't know why I get up. And I'm not an accountant. I'm not a CPA. I'm just an analyst. So I'm a lot of things. But anyway, I know a lot about accounting. I just got a new book about accounting. What was my squirrel thing showing there? Oh my god. This is Arthur Lev. Baruch Lev. I'm sorry. I always call him Arthur. Baruch Lev and Feng Gu. And Baruch Lev and Feng Gu wrote this book about accounting that if you're an investor, you ought to read this book along with The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. If you read those two books, you'll be well on your way to understand value investing in the equity markets and what kind of shenanigans go on behind the scenes when it comes to accounting. Some of you may have noticed this morning that let's go back to Wall Street Journal. You may have noticed. Look, here's behind the supply curve. We're gonna do this. Walmart and Kroger bottle their own milk and shake up the American dairy industry. I got a sister who's in that industry. She owns my old farm, and it's interesting. Look at this, $1.19. Is that a gallon? I don't even know. Let's see. Is that a gallon of milk? 1 gallon, $1.19. Wow. So why are they doing that? Now, any of you who are in marketing, you know what the story is. It doesn't cost $1.19. This is bad for farmers. They're quaking in their boots. No pun intended. Because milk is a loss leader. So where is the milk in the store? Wait for your answer. Where is it? It's all the way in the damn back of the store. Why? Because Kelly says, oh, shoot, we are out of milk, Jimmy. Get in your truck and go down and get some milk. And I go, sure, on it. And I go down and I go to the King Super in town. I got to go all the way back to the store. Well, what do I do? I just told you in the last frame what kind of consumer I am. I buy all sorts of stupid crap on the way back to the milk. So they call milk a loss leader. When you get, and I studied agricultural economics at the University of Connecticut, and I wrote a paper on the dairy industry and marketing. And that was, I did a study on how supermarkets are laid out to put the loss leaders where you can't find them. So people, they got to walk all around the store to get that thing that they want, and they end up buying more stuff than they want. But that's not why I brought up the journal. I wanted you to see this. If you were paying attention this morning, Under Armour, high flyer, right? High flyer. What's a Wells notice? A Wells notice. That the Securities and Exchange Commission is the regulatory body for stocks, and they've given a Wells notice. Kevin Plank and his CFO that they could face civil enforcement actions related to the sportswear makers' past accounting practices. They did something wrong. Their accounting sucks. If you very quickly, you can see this is a chart of the stock. A chart of the stock. What was Under Armour? UA? It should be United Artists. UA, look at this gap up here. Well, what happened here? One day it was here, the next day it was here. Well, if you look, that was February. Here's March. Here's where Corona came to roost in March. Everything went down. The whole market went down. But here, what was going on? It turns out that was their earnings came out that day, and they sucked. And it looked pretty bad. Now you can see there's all kinds of problems here. A lot of blank spaces, no PE. Under Armour was having trouble. Everybody knew it. I say everybody. Everybody on Wall Street knew it. But anyhow, the stock was up a little today, even after getting that Wells notice. That means that maybe they've made a commitment to fix what's wrong with their accounting. But a Wells notice comes from the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and it means we are getting ready to take action if you don't straighten out your house. It's never good. It means that you've done something wrong. Okay, back to inputs and costs, and the idea that we're sort of delving into accounting here. That's why I bring it up. This is where accounting and economics collides. And if you're one of those guys like Brian, I know you say, well, what does it mean? What does any of this mean to me? Why am I studying this? Well, this chapter maybe is where you go, okay, now this I could use inputs and costs at a company that I'm working at to try and use some of the tools that I learned in the class to help the company. Anyway, what's a firm's production function? Why is production often subject to diminishing returns? Well, we know this on inputs. What types of costs does a firm face, and how did the firm generate its marginal and average cost curves? I'll tell you a couple of neat stories about that. Why does the firm cost differ in the short run and in the long run? What is the long run? I don't know. These are subjective, right? In the long run, we're all dead. Famous Keynes. What is increasing returns to scale, and what advantage does it give? This one is where we're going to argue. This idea that, oh, look at Google, they're so big, nobody could ever compete. What a crock. They get too big to fail. No, they get too big to exist. Production is the process of turning inputs into outputs. That sounds so stupid, doesn't it? Production is the process of turning inputs into outputs. I'm going to mix land, labor, and capital, right, with inputs, and I'm going to make a product, right? The cost structure of a firm depends on the nature of the production process. The production function is a relationship between the quantity of inputs a firm uses and the quantity of output it produces. A fixed input is an input whose quantity is fixed for a period of time and cannot be varied. That sounds very subjective because it is. Is your electric bill fixed? Well, yes and no. The price of oil being what it is, it's not always fixed. A variable, but in the period of time that we're talking about, a quarter, a year, excuse me. Variable input is an input whose quantity the firm can vary at any time, according to production, right? How many widgets you make may vary that. So, long run is the period which all inputs can be varied. That's the long run. Short run, period in which at least one input is fixed. Electricity, oil, energy. The total product curve shows the quantity of output depends on the quantity of the variable input for a given quantity of the fixed input. That sounds like mumbo jumbo. Say it 3 times, it'll sink in. Think about it. Quantity of output depends on the quantity of the variable input for a given quantity of the fixed input. Right? So the amount of electricity is dependent on how many widgets we make. Marginal product, change in output, change in quantity, change in labor. Is a change resulting from a 1 unit increase in the amount of labor input. Marginal product initially rises as more workers are hired, then it declines. Why? People stand around. Stuff happens. Past a certain point, another field worker field worker will be so crowded that his marginal product will be lower than the last worker's. If we're picking strawberries, we start tripping over each other, right? I've been in there. I've picked apples. I know how it is. And you start talking, and I love talking, and you know, I'm the guy getting fired. So the relationship between inputs and output is positive, but not constant. It's a curve. Marginal product of labor changes along the production function. Yes? Makes sense? Already it's getting mathy. Adding a 7 workers leads to an increase in output of only 7 bushels. Second worker, 17 bushels. Geez, what happened? Right? Do I need to move me? I'll move me up here somewhere. Okay. I don't really like seeing me. This thing was screwing up. My son was like, just take you out. Nobody wants to see you. I was like, how do you know? He said, because I don't want to see any of my professors. I was like, yeah, that's because they suck. Anyway, marginal product of an input is the additional quantity of output that's produced by using one more unit, right? So marginal product labor is a change in quantity of output produced by one additional unit of labor, whatever that unit is. Change in quantity of output divided by the change in the quantity of labor, right? So MPL equals change in quantity divided by the change of labor, right? Simple enough. So if when I'm recording up here, Kelly, I'll be right down. Thanks. So if one worker makes 14 baskets, 2 workers 34, 3 workers, see we can which worker yield the highest marginal product? 14 to 34, right? Second worker, yeah. You know, that's just a little math trick. Marginal product is the slope of the total product curve. That's the marginal product is the slope. Rise over run, right? If we go back here, we'll see it here. Rise over run, right? Rise over run. Okay. There are diminishing returns to an input when an increase in the quantity of that input holding all the levels of all other inputs fixed leads to a decline in the marginal product. Yes, simple. Simple understanding. Now they make it a little more complicated. With more land, a fixed input, each worker can produce more. This shifts the total product curve up. Yes? The marginal product of labor, bushels per worker, rises. Right? Quantity of wheat and quantity of labor rises. Pretty good. So the MPL of each worker is higher when the farm is larger. Yeah, this is provable, and you can do this, right? You can do this experiment. Malthus, one of the greatest idiots of our time, predicted that as population grew, this is still being argued today. The economy's diminishing ability to produce food from a given set of resources would necessarily lead to insufficient food. However, population continues to grow, and so does food production. I'm told now the best analysis that I've seen is that we're going to peak. Population is going to peak somewhere around 9 billion or so, and then drop off due to what could be a Kuznets population curve. As people get wealthier, they have fewer children. Fewer of them die. There's a lot to that. Mr. Gates and his wife Belinda are very interested in that number. What aspect of food production did Malthus fail to anticipate? What did he fail to anticipate? Why is Malthus? He was just selling books. I really don't like him, as you can tell. He failed to anticipate the big T, which is technology. So when I started farming, we planted corn on 32-inch rows. When I was done, it was 14-inch rows. Same plant, same production, on the same acre of land. So that's pretty amazing. And you can say that it was not bad for the environment. You can't show me that it was. The MPL is defined as an increase in the quantity of output when you increase the quantity of input by 1 unit. What do we mean by a unit of labor? Is it an additional hour, a week, a person year? What's your metric? It doesn't matter as long as you're consistent, right? Just be consistent. Fixed cost does not depend on the quantity of output produced. It's the cost of a fixed input. Variable cost, it is the cost of a variable input that depends on the quantity of output produced. We do the same thing in accounting. All right, we're trying to figure out what's fixed and what's variable. What you own a deli? What's most likely fixed? Bread, tomato, employees, dining room, right? That's going to be there for the longest time. You probably have a mortgage on your dining room unless you're renting it, in which case I'm going to advise you to buy it so you can get through the next pandemic. Total cost curve, the total cost of producing a given quantity of output. This is like total revenue. We have a total cost. Is fixed cost and variable cost, right? Simple enough. The total cost curve becomes steeper as more output is produced, the result of diminishing returns, a diminishing return. So, which flies in the face of, well, if we get big, we'll do better. Only up to a point. Only up to a point. Total cost curve, here's how it graphs out. The curve gets steeper as output increases due to diminishing returns to labor. Amazon is no different. They lose money. They don't make money. It could be the bigger fraud than global warming. And I'm not saying that it's not getting warmer. I'm just saying that I don't think carbon is going to end up being the main driver. So we agree that the temperature is changing. Well, somewhat. I think there's been a pause lately. Anyhow, Amazon is a fraud. The marginal cost is the change in total cost generated by each additional output. Change, delta, right? We call this delta. It equals change, total cost, and Q is quantity. It gets us to marginal cost. So we start looking at it. We can use this as a tool at Selena's Gourmet Salsas. Selena can decide. She can say to herself, you know what? I'm not going to add that. I'm not going to add that extra person. It's just not worth it, right? And or you know, I'll add somebody, but it's really just it's because I want to take care of somebody. Anyway, so here's the example at Selena's Gourmet Salsa. Let's see how this goes, right? The 8th case of salsa increases total cost by $180. The second, only $36, right? And here's our marginal cost, cost of case. Right? Now we can figure out a BE, break even. Because there's diminishing returns to inputs in this example, as output increases, the marginal product of the variable input declines. This implies that more and more of each variable input must be used to produce each additional unit of output, right? And since each unit of variable input must be paid for, the cost per additional unit of output also rises. Yes. Useful? We think so, don't we? So here's how to get our average cost. Average total cost, often referred to simply as average cost. Total cost per unit of output produced, ATC, is TC divided by quantity, right? Total cost divided by quantity. Fixed cost divided by quantity. Average variable cost divided by quantity. Simple enough. You produce widgets. Everybody knows that a widget is an economist construct. I don't even know where it came from. There's a history of widgets. Currently, you produce 4 widgets at 40 bucks, 10 bucks a widget, right? Suppose you produce 1 more widget, the 5th, at a marginal cost of $5. If you do produce that 5th widget, what will your average total cost be? Has your average total cost increased or decreased? Right? It went to 9. Right? Because you're going to add them up and divide by 5. Okay? Now, back to Selena. Right? Pretty simple. Look at what it looks like. At 3, minimum average total cost. We can tell. You don't have to do any calculus. You just graph it and you go, oh, here. That's the minimum average total cost. Is that where we should produce? At 70 whatever, or yeah, 70 whatever it is a case. 3 cases? I don't know. Increasing output has 2 opposing effects on average total cost. The spreading effect, the larger the output, the more output over which the fixed cost is spread, leading to lower average fixed cost, right? Right? What if we put a 3rd shift on? Well, we own the building already. It doesn't change the fixed costs of the mortgage. Diminishing returns effect, the larger the output, the more variable input required to produce additional units. A 3rd shift doesn't work as hard. I mean, that's just a fact. It's hard to find a lot of people who want to work at night. So when we put the 4 cost curves together, marginal cost upward sloping because of diminishing returns. Average variable cost is also upward sloping, but it's flatter than the marginal cost. Average fixed cost is downward sloping because of the spreading effect, you know. The marginal cost curve intersects the average total cost curve from below, crossing it as its lowest point. Right? At high levels of output, the spreading effect, of course, is weaker than the diminishing returns effect. Always? Yes, pretty much always. So here's where here's where it looks like when you put it all together. Is this useful? Yeah, this is useful. If you're Selena and you're you took this class, you could go, you know what, I should set up these curves just so I can see if I'm on the right track here. I want to buy another building. Well, okay, you know, but there's a lot of other variables involved. You know, can we sell it if we make more? Can we? But it's a help. It's a tool. Minimum cost output is the quantity of output at which average total cost is lowest. The bottom of the U-shaped average cost curve. I just showed you that. 3 general principles that are always true about a firm's marginal cost and average total cost curves. At the minimum cost output, average total cost is equal to marginal cost. At output less than the minimum cost output, marginal cost is less than average total cost. And average total cost is falling, right? True. At output greater than the minimum cost output, marginal cost is greater than average total cost, and average total cost is rising. Now this is, when you think about it mathematically, I know it's a mouthful, but when you think about it mathematically, it makes sense. And here it is graphically to help you not be so confused. If marginal cost is above average total cost is rising. Marginal cost is above, right? Average total cost must be rising. If the marginal cost is below average total cost, right? We're on that situation where, man, this is great. Our average cost per unit is still going down, so our marginal cost is falling, right? Our average total cost is falling. I mean, that's really cool. Okay, a couple more slides, and we'll call it a tape. Does the marginal cost curve always slope upward? Well, but diminishing returns set in once the benefits from specialization are exhausted and marginal costs begin to rise. It increasing at point one, increasing specialization initially leads to lower marginal costs. You know, people get really good at making widgets, but then that diminishes, especially if you have turnover in labor, and you just start to think about the variables. They'll come to you logically in your head. Short run, long run. In the long run, we're all dead. All inputs are variable in the long run. Of course, this means that in the long run, fixed costs like factory size may also vary. Yeah, we buy another factory. I think I told you, when you do that simulation with the sneaker company, if that's what you end up doing as a capstone, you'll expand factories, and you'll build a factory overseas or here in the States, or in South America or something. The firm will choose its fixed cost in the long run based on the level of output it expects to produce. Right? You may buy that piece of land today and add to your fixed cost, thinking that you're going to expand at a later date. These are tough. That's where strategic management comes in, which is part of my master's is in that. And you're trying to plan ahead. We were just doing it. I'm on the board of the local Mine Springs Hospital, and we're making a lot of moves in that direction of what do we need in the future. Trying to plan ahead. There's a trade-off choosing the level of fixed costs. There's a trade-off between higher fixed costs and lower variable costs for any given output level, and vice versa. Yes, right? And you can see this graphically. At low output level, low fixed cost yields lower average total cost. The high fixed cost yields lower average total costs. Yeah, that's going to happen until it doesn't. The long run average total cost curve shows the relationship between output and average total cost when fixed cost has been chosen to minimize average total cost at each level of output. See, we assume the firm has chosen the cheapest plant size for each output level. We also assume that they didn't make any mistakes, which is a hell of an assumption. Short run and long run average total cost curves differ because the firm can choose its fixed costs in the long run, right? We can hedge jet fuel if we're an airline. We can buy it in advance. We can store it. We can do all kinds of things to try and help with our long-term fixed costs. So returns to scale go away. There's an increasing return to scale, economies of scale, when long-run average total cost declines as output increases. I started to talk about this in monopolies. Monopolies don't exist because this is wrong. There are decreasing returns to scale, diseconomies, when long-run average total cost increases as output increases. This is the Tower of Babel. When you get too big, you start doing dumb stuff, and you have too many employees, mostly middle management, and then you get these decreasing returns to scale. There are constant returns to scale when long-run average total cost is constant as output increases. I don't think you can't really show me a company where that is true, except in a monopoly created by government. So there you go. There's chapters 10 and 11, and that's what I've got for you tonight. And maybe I'll make another tape tomorrow, 12, 13, talk a little bit about some more fun stuff. I hope you enjoyed it, and that'll be enough for